Welcome to The Whole Pineapple. I'm Ruby Boris.
And I'm Ann Judge. The Whole Pineapple is a podcast about wellness focused around fertility. And on these weekly mini episodes, we bring you bite-sized ideas for you to snack on.
Like breathing exercises, book reviews. Maybe we'll review some scientific research, or we'll share some wellness and fertility stories from our listeners.
So if you're looking for a tip or a trick related to your fertility and well-being, then you've come to the right place.
Let's dig in.
Welcome back to the Whole Pineapple Snack Edition. This is our special OL Rain episode where we are welcomed back by Nikki, Stanton, and Lou Barnes. Hopefully you checked out their full episode. And again, hopefully Seattle area, go get season tickets or get tickets to the Challenge Cup. It's awesome. They're really, really fun games to go to. You can have like the same Lumen Field experience, except there's not a bunch of drunk soccer bros. It's just a really nice, like family-friendly environment. So I love the rain. I'm happy to be here. And we talked a lot in the first episode about being a professional athlete, especially being a professional athlete with the joys and tribulations of having a uterus and some of the things that go along with that. And today on the snack, we want to talk a little bit more on that macro level about like double standards in sports. And especially, we talked the first episode about the very paltry salary that these players made when they were first starting up. So talk a little bit about like the pay gap in women's soccer, because I feel like this has been so exciting to see over the last few years, there actually being significant progress.
It's actually just like, it has been life-changing for me, I think, and Nikki as well. We've been in the league for so long. I think what the U.S. national team girls have done has been like incredible, and it's really opened a lot of conversations, and maybe just like the fact that people didn't know what was kind of going on with the pay gap. I think a lot of that still really helps the 2% of people playing. I think our league still struggles. I'd have to look at MLS and NWSL and to see, I still think there's probably quite a big gap with, I'd call them your average soccer players. So people that aren't playing for your national team, where there's maybe a dual income coming in, where we're solely just like here with your club and that's where you're getting paid from. This stuff would never happen if, those girls didn't start the fight so many years ago. And, just seeing like the investment that is going into women's soccer, I think is huge. And I think that's what's actually going to carry things out for like the long term of the league. We're 10 years young still. So, the progress we have made is like incredible in the time that we've been there. Like I think the MLS is like 25 years, old. So it's like they've still got 15 years on us.
Even soccer to catch on in the US is relatively young, compared to other countries. So,
totally.
Yeah.
So what we've been able to do in the 10 years of NWSL is like truly incredible. And I think it's only can continue to get better, which is going to be, I can't wait to see that. And I hope, when I do have kids, that this league's around and, people make a lifestyle out of it where you don't have to worry about like, I'm in this like transition where I feel like I have to stop playing and then I'm going to have to start a whole new career. And that's like pretty, maybe an irrational fear. I don't really know, but like definitely a fear of mine that like I've only done one thing for the last, 13 years and it hasn't paid me anything. I have a lot of very good memories, very good friends. And, the foundation that I have been able to build for the NWSL is something I'm very proud of. But at the end of the day, I'm like, I have my network, which is great, but I'm basically to have to start over and, find out what exactly that is that I want to do. And that's a little bit scary, but in terms of being able to do this as long as I wanted to, getting some of those benefits towards the end of this, end of my career has been like incredible. And I truly like cannot wait to see like what it's going to, bring to another 15 years of the soccer and what, girls in the league are going to be able to do with that is going to be incredible.
So what is the structure now? You mentioned when you first started, it was like you got hired for 6 months and they paid you barely nothing. Like when people are now starting off and like, is it like a full year commitment? Do you actually make a living wage? How does it work for the younger players right now if this is their first time playing professional sports?
Yeah, I think in the WPS, we actually didn't have a minimum or a maximum. So that's like why the league folded. So you had someone from a big international player making $1 million and you had Nikki and I making 6,000. Like it is just not sustainable. Like there's, for 6 months of that. But what's been nice is that there definitely is some security in our jobs now. There is a minimum when you come in as a rookie. Our minimum when we came in is like below, minimum wage, way below minimum wage. That's kind of closing, which is awesome. So when you think about kids coming out of college that, they're right on the mark of what they probably would if they got their first job. It's not something very crazy where it's like, okay, do I continue my career or do I go, with my education and see, maybe be able to make a lot more, where I don't think you have to make those decisions as much anymore. You can have third party investors now come in as well to help with salary caps, which is nice. And I think something that NWSL still needs to learn that, like the English league probably has over us is how to pay players that should be paid a lot. Because you also want to have the best players, right? And to get the best players, you're going to have to pay them. You don't want our league to not have that capacity. So I think they're trying to find a way to kind of increase that, which would help our league significantly and still become one of the best leagues in the world. But yeah, the structure is just, I think, more sustainable than what it ever has been. Even from 2013, Nikki, I think I was still making like $12,000. Like I talked about WPS and making $6,000, but it's like the NWSL, you weren't doing anything better. So it's definitely like really incredible to see that we have like that minimum and a salary cap on players as well, and be able to bring in money from that's outsourced that, will help sustain players coming in and having jobs that will pay what we should be paid.
So in the past, was it pretty typical to have players where you would play in the US, but then you'd also go play overseas in different seasons to be able to try and make more money?
Yeah, there actually, Lou and I both, there was like a really cool opportunity where the Australia League was like right on our off season. So you could just go straight to Australia and then back, but then you're playing a whole season for 12 months just so that you can get paid for 12 months.
Yeah.
Because like Lou said, it would be, I don't know, it's gotten longer every season, but I remember I would pack a 2 suitcases and fly to Sky Blue and live out of 2 suitcases for 7 months. And then we didn't have housing in the off season. So then it was, okay, fine, I'll pack my suitcase again and fly back. So every time it was like, you're repacking a bag. Whereas now we have living at least for the full year, which is good.
And insurance for the full year.
Insurance. Yeah, we didn't even talk about that yet.
When I came and talked to you guys about egg freezing, like at least half the people that are listening had like ice packs on their knees and their hips and everything. Like, this is a physical job and you can get hurt. And if you get hurt playing not for your league, like what does that do? And how does that relate to your salary? It's really tough having a job that's tied to your physical ability, but also things that are not always in your control. So,
and I think the reason I played in the off season was financially and insurance. Like it made the most sense to me, but like in the long run, Nikki and I were playing year round with maybe 2 weeks in between, which also shortens your career because now you're overloaded and there's risk for more injuries and there's risk that you just get burnt out and having to do all this travel, where it's like MLS, they play a lot of games, but they have a proper off season where you don't have to worry about anything. You can take care of your body, you can recover, you can be with your family. Whereas like for 6 years, I went overseas. I missed Christmas. I missed all the holidays you could think of, just so I can like stay afloat and get paid and make sure I had insurance and keep myself healthy. And it was incredible that I got to travel to Australia and like live that life, which like I'm very fortunate, but a lot of it was almost kind of forced.
And then you don't feel fortunate if you don't feel like it's a choice, if you feel like this is just the only thing I can do to be able to even keep making this as my lifestyle. So
in the beginning of the league, a lot of people, I mean, again, I'm making $6,000 for however many months. It's like, people are going to leave the sport, doing what they love and what they've like dreamed of doing to go to a job that they maybe won't like as much, but they get paid more.
Well, I think this is just like such an important discussion just to even have this conversation, because I don't think people realize exactly how big the gap is and things like that, where you are working year round and you're at higher risk for injuries and things. And on top of that, like having to deal with like finding insurance, getting things paid for, and then having to deal with your like reproductive health and family planning and things all on top of that. It's a lot of pressure.
Maybe talk us through like what's a typical day like for you? Like when you are like training, like what are you actually doing to keep your body in the shape that it's in?
So at OL Reign, we have to be there by like 9:30 and just kind of hang out. And then we have like a team meeting. And then after the team meeting, we do prehab, which is something that like I've honestly like never done in any other clubs, where you have to kind of like you're forced to like, hey, work on your body, which now that I'm older, I'm like, I actually need it.
I also let you say now that I'm older. How old are you again?
I'm 32, which actually like I think it's one thing that Lou said is like, if I could, I would play soccer my whole life, but it's like, we have a career that there is a cutoff date. There's a date where like you actually can't go any further. So we have to find a new passion. We have to find something, which is terrifying. Like I dread the day that I have to retire. I always say I'll retire when my body fails me, or I don't love the sport anymore. I think my body's probably going to fail me, but again, that's like so sad that it's going to be my age that's going to like force me to not do what I love and what I've loved doing for so long. So we do our prehab, and then we go out to training where we have like a very extensive warm up. I like hate prehab and warm up, even though that as I'm older, I know that, okay, Nikki, you actually have to focus in. Like every morning I write, Nikki, you will focus in on the warm up. I'm like, ugh.
Yeah, I'm getting to that point too, where I'm like, oh man, I actually really need to stretch before and after. I'm like, oh man, okay.
I'm at the stage where you wake up and you're like, oh, my right ankle buckles today because I slept weird. Like I didn't even do anything bad working out. I guess it's just things are going to fall apart for no reason now. So
I have torn labrums in both my hips, and depending on whichever one is flared up, is I have to sleep on the other side, and I have to sleep with a pillow in between my knees. And it's just like, I don't even think about it. I'm like, I check my hips. Okay, we're sleeping on our left side tonight. Okay, where's my knee pillow? Like, it's like, I'm 32. This shouldn't be that. Or I know that I can't really go upstairs early in the morning because my knees are sore, but we learn to live with it. I just can't, it'll be interesting to see how our bodies are in 40 years, but I don't have super high hopes.
So then you train for a couple hours.
Yeah. So we train for a couple hours, and then like a lot of people do extras. And then we usually have like gym, which everyone's kind of, need something different, I think. But then a lot of us, like if you're injured, like I've kind of had like a nagging injury where then I have to stay like and do rehab and like get treatment. So like, yes, we're at our job for a less amount of time, but it's like so physically draining and taxing. And then also like when you're done, you have to like watch film, or like, you're kind of constantly like figuring out what you could do better. But yeah, it's a lot on the body. I'm tired.
I think too that just listening to Nikki go through our day, I have some pretty good friends at Sounders, and I've obviously watched them for the last 11 years, but the amount of like trainers, masseuses, doctors on hand that they have that we do not is actually wild. And we do the same exact job. Yeah. And you know what? Like the Sounders have supported us like more recently than in the past. I've had a lot of the men, reach out saying like, how can we use our platforms, our voices for you? So you have seen that side increase, which I think is really important because we've obviously talked about pay equity and whatnot.
It was very cool having the doubleheader day of having like the Sounders game and the Rain game. I wish they did more of that too.
Yeah.
So,
but like when I talk to the boys, and it's like, yeah, they have so many masseuses that their masseuses are getting like massages sometimes, and I'm like,
massage therapist for massage therapists.
We have 30-minute slots on like 2 days out of the week that you hope you get on the list for, because she can only do 6 people a day.
And when you fly, I assume is it commercial, or do you guys have?
Yeah, it's like commercial. Yeah. I was just like thinking about like our days, and it's like just doing the same thing, but not having like, we don't have the luxury to just get a massage every day like we probably should, what we're putting our bodies through. And the pre-act that Nikki spoke about, like something that I didn't do either. So it's like really cool that our younger ones get to experience that, because they can now take care of their bodies a lot earlier than we got to, with a lot more resources. Like there is more resources. I'm not saying we don't have, or we haven't had more since like Nikki and I started playing in the league. And not to be like negative, but like it's still not where it should be, in terms of like where we're asking to perform, how often we're asked to perform, at the level we're asked to perform. Like MLS, like love it, but like that's not the highest soccer. That's overseas. We're like here in the US with women's, like we are like they're number one, like our league is high up there. There's a lot of arguments which one's better, but like between the two leagues, like we're close. It's not a huge gap, where I think on the men's side kind of is. And just to like think that we don't get the same pay for doing the same exact thing, it's still, I can't ever wrap my head around it. And honestly, if you talk to the men, they'd be like, we want you to have that. It's not like there's any like battle with that, or we're bumping heads. And maybe like other clubs and other men's teams there are like, but I do think we're fortunate enough to have the Sounders support us and actually like have blueprints where it's like, this is how it should be. And, the standards should be here. And they like want us to push for that as well.
That actually reminded me of something when you said about other clubs. When I was at Chicago, we shared the same area with the Chicago Fire, and then we had a shared ice bath and a hot bath, which is like so crucial, especially in Chicago summers, like whatever you need to like protect your body. And they would they were like, hey, we're going to pick from like 9 a.m. until 4 p.m. It's us. Like that was their time that they got it, their slot. And we're like,
so
okay,
go in at like 10
so you have to go, yeah.
We're like, okay, well, that's most of the day. And there was one time where we had a really hard practice. And I think it was maybe like 3:30. We went in to go take an ice bath. The men had left. And we were like, hey, like we tried to just walk in. And a woman actually working for the Chicago Fire was like, you can't be here. And I remember being like, I was like, we're on the women's team and like the men are gone. And they're like, you can't be here. It's not 4. And I was like flabbergasted. I was like, in what world do you have a woman saying that you can't use this facility that the men can use for most of the day? That was like really upsetting for me. I was like, wow, we still have such a far, far, far way to go.
Right. Yes. That's a really good example of that.
Full on episodes with Nikki's experience in the NWSL. And it's something that's like truly like traumatizing. And I'm so glad that, I mean, I wish everyone could come play for the Reign. I truly do. When I hear stories of Nikki from like Sky Blue, because I have other friends other than Nikki that were on Sky Blue at the time. And, you know, you just don't hear the stories until you see someone like that firsthand, went through all those experiences and is willing to also share that, which Nikki has been super brave, and we're able to hear those stories and we can now protect her in our space that we have. But some clubs are like, it's unbelievable how far they are from bare minimum of like standards that we deserve. And it's like really hard to think that you have to fight for bare minimum.
Yeah.
And, you know, so even as like Seattle and our club, I just hope that as we're fighting for like my club and our team in general, that we're also fighting for like the greater of NWSL and globally as well, because I'm sure it's happening overseas as well.
Yeah. All working women.
Totally.
Yeah.
And when people do experience like what it could look like or should be, that like when it's part of the business that people go to different clubs and do different things, that they like take those standards with them and be like, no, I'm now confident enough to like fight because I know that like this is where it should be. So I think it's so important that those like cultures are developed, not just to like be successful in your own club and your own family, but to honestly spread that to the rest of the NWSL for me, and like obviously globally as well. But
what's true, I mean, as long as we talk about the U.S. not having like great family-friendly policies, at least in women's soccer, this article recently about the moms, like it, and first of all, I have to say the title because it was hilarious. A new era of soccer moms is their headline, so you gotta love that. But they mentioned like having at least some players that are really showing this on the U.S. women teams, that now certain European players are like, hey, I'm going to take maternity leave and come back. And they were like, I'm sorry, what is this? Like, because it's the same thing. It's like, but you're going to have a baby. That means you're done. Like there, it's not even like considered that you might try to come back after. So in some ways, we are still setting that example for, you know, trying to slowly inch that bar. We had a guest on the first season who was talking about, I love this, I stole it from Laura Hayden's episode, but like how you're trying to raise the bar, and by the way, the bar is in hell. And so you're just like slowly raising that bar. And so although things are definitely far from being equal, at least there's some of these changes. And that's one of the challenges too. We talked in the first episode about how great it is that we are trying to partner and offer egg freezing, but there are other people that kind of challenge that on the other side, that it's like, is it just like a Band-Aid saying, okay, well, fine, you can freeze your eggs and then we don't have to worry about any of this other stuff. Like we did it, we got some eggs from you. So now just play as hard as you can for as long as you can, as opposed to looking at policies that might make it easier if people wanted to try and, you know, have options while they were an athlete while still also trying to build their family, instead of assuming that egg freezing is just a fix for it all.
Yeah, totally. I've like touched on this so much, but the educational part, like even being able to go and, you know, I just had my blood drawn and the ultrasound done. So like I'm pretty far into the process. I know it's like nothing's guaranteed, but like education and knowledge is just like power. Like you do get to make more choices, you know, for yourself in ways that we should, you know, and I think that's like what's really important. So not that it's like a fix or anything, but like I think you just rather know than not.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the many reasons Anna and I started this podcast too, because we were just frustrated about the amount of things that women just didn't even know about their own bodies, because we just don't, no one teaches us those things. We're just left to figure it out.
And you can take super great care of yourself. You know,
Yeah,
again, like
totally.
your egg supply is kind of, a lot of it is out of your control. And I think that's something that we see a lot in our practice. We see women coming in their, 40s, and they're like, but I'm in great shape. I work out,
Yeah.
I run marathons, I do yoga. Like, I'm sure my fertility's fine. And like, that doesn't unfortunately have much to do with how healthy you are from the outside. Like, your ovaries are mysteries inside.
Yeah.
And we have to kind of do some testing to figure it out.
Totally. I think we're told that as well. Like I can probably
Yeah.
quote my mom a million times being like, it's okay, like you're healthy, you're active, like she didn't know any better either, and so I feel like we've always been told that as women that, like you make sure you're always keeping in shape so you can be healthy enough to have kids.
I was just going to say there's a whole nother side of that, right?
Yeah. So it's like kind of crazy that like society has obviously done that.
Like be in shape and take care of your body, but not too much.
Yeah, totally.
I was just going to say that I'm super thankful for like the whole presentation that you guys did, because if anyone were to ask me like, oh, do you want to freeze your eggs? I would say yes. And if they would say, do you know what they do? I would say absolutely not. I have no idea. But it's something that I've always wanted to do, but I literally couldn't tell you. And all the like the science behind it was so insane. Like I just was like blown away. I was like, who can I call to talk about this? Like, this is so cool. Like it was really educational. I think everybody should be educated even early on to know that this is an option. Like the younger ones, it was really cool that, hey, you guys could actually do this. Because like Lou and I are older and we're just learning, and like now it's lucky that we can, get in there and do it. But it's nice for the younger girls to definitely get to know and get the education.
And at the olders, like we can encourage that now too. Like I think a lot of it was probably fear-based because you don't know anything. And like, I don't know what percentage on our team that want to have kids or not. Like it doesn't matter. But like, even if you don't want to have kids, like, and you're still educated in this, it's important. So like, yeah, I encourage a lot of the younger ones. And like Nikki said, I think we're like great examples that we're like this old and we're just learning as well. So it's like, it doesn't matter actually when you start, but like if you get to start at whatever, Angie's 21, Jordan's 21, like I wish I would have known this, 15 years ago if I could.
Yeah, as we kind of wrap up, like, are there other things that you like find yourself giving as advice to younger players that, the things that you wish you'd known when you were first starting out?
Yes.
I literally try to do as much as possible.
Yeah. And because I feel Lou and I have like just honestly like learned so much, but I think my number one thing is like make sure that you also have a life outside of soccer, which I didn't really have until recently. And that's just like such a game changer. And I always try to tell everybody, like, find a hobby, find like anything that you like to do that's outside of soccer, because it can be so consuming. And when you're being judged like every day at practice, like the stress we put on ourselves is just so crazy. So just like have that outlet is so amazing.
I think about like when I was in the WPS and like the older girls that were above me, that I think most of them probably only had 1 or 2 years as pro experience. So now like our girls get knowledge from people that have been in the league 10 years, 11 years. So like there is so much knowledge to like tap into. So I think for me as like an older player and a leader on the team that like I try to be vulnerable. So like girls do know that they can come to me and speak to me about anything. I always tell like the younger ones that like ask, like the worst that can be said is like no, but I'm like ask like in your contract for anything you want, ask for, when you're getting into your housing, like I mean, we were talking about like ACs. Like there's a couple of our units that don't have ACs and we're like dying in the middle of summer in Seattle. And it's like sleep is like one of our biggest recoveries to like perform on the field. And like some girls aren't sleeping and they're like afraid to be like, can you get me an AC? I'm like, no, go ask them. Go ask them. The worst they can say no, and then we'll figure it out. Keep your receipts. I say, keep your receipts for everything and take it in. Yeah. So I really encourage like those conversations with the young ones. Like I love to get coffee and try to just be like, telling our story, Nick, like is so important. Like even when I hear yours again and again, I'm just like so inspired every time. Like it doesn't matter, like I get emotional about it because I'm like, we've gone through some shit. And I'm like so excited that we can like change that course for the younger ones. And I think like our environment allows that because it's like it is so open and it's like we've got such a diverse, locker room. We have a trans player, like we've got trans staff. Like it is just so open to the world that like, and that trickles, like it's trickled into my family. Like we can have these conversations now, because it's like more normalized. And I think that's like what really changes the course and like why sports and especially like soccer is just like so important for like so many different reasons. So it's really cool to see.
Well, you guys are doing it. You're doing the work. What you're doing is really important for this next generation and for even for little girls who maybe won't be professional athletes, just to see women standing up for what is right and what we can do.
Well, when I have this thing, because when I first got to like Rain and I was like, oh my God, we get 2 laundry loops, or oh my God, we get go macro bars. And I was getting so excited. I'm like, oh my God, we got bathrobes. And Lou every time is like, you deserve this. And it's so cute. I would get so excited over something small and she would say that. And I'd be like, I do, because like now Lou and I now know what like we need to have. So we can tell everybody like, hey, this isn't okay, or this is okay. Where when I was like in the Sky Blues and the Chicagos, I didn't know that it was so wrong. And I'm looking back on it and I was like, how did I not know? But you're also afraid to ask, which is wonderful that Lou's telling everybody to ask, because I was terrified. Because I'm like, well, if I'm not like the best player on the team and I ask for something, am I disposable? My contract isn't even like guaranteed. So, oh, this girl, she's asked for too much, just cut her. We don't need her. Like, that's what I literally thought. I was like, I better just not ruffle any feathers and just go through this and just be okay with what I have.
I feel like that's such like the whole message we're trying to do here, this whole like you deserve it. It's like you deserve to not have painful periods. Like you deserve to understand your body. Like you deserve to understand your fertility.
You deserve to not have to ice at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
When you're trying to sleep.
Take that ice bath when it's actually most important and everything. So
literally, it's wild. And I think it's also just women like empowering others. Like, yes, we're competitive, but like if we aren't like fighting for the same things, like and tearing each other down, it like makes no sense. And it's like I've like volunteered my time to even speak to other girls on other teams being like, this is not okay. I've done stuff with Chicago like recently this year and I'm like had to talk to some of their players being like, that's not okay. We have lawyers now, like go to our lawyers, talk it out, like fight for it. There's been so much growth, but like underneath some of the layers there's still a lot of trauma and a lot of space for growth, I think. And I think the only way we do that is like uplifting each other from all over. So like, it doesn't matter what team you play for, we should have a fair playing field. So when we are out in the field and we're competing, that, we're all competing at the highest level with all the resources possible. And that's what makes soccer so beautiful. Like you want to play the best of the best at all times.
Yeah, I think there is such a disparity in all the clubs. Like there's some that have like a lot of things and there's some that literally don't have even the bare minimum. And we're asking everybody to compete on the same field with like completely different resources, which is just like it's not fair.
Well, and in the article I read about the Achilles, it's not even the same field. Sometimes you're having to play on like dirt or like you're not even getting the turf. So, you don't even necessarily have the same field for the resources that and you've got to talk about these things and advocate to ever make any kind of change. So I think it's great.
You're literally not on the same ground.
Truly. So yeah, I think podcasts like this obviously like really does just open conversations. And I think you see a lot of like outlets now that are helping amplify our voices, which is really important. So like, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. You guys are incredible.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of the Whole Pineapple Podcast. We hope it was helpful.
If you know someone who could benefit from hearing the podcast, we hope you'll share it with them.
And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the Whole Pineapple on your favorite podcast app. Every rating and review makes us easier to find.
This podcast is sponsored by Seattle Reproductive Medicine and is produced by Audiotocracy Podcast Production. We'll see you next time. Have a delicious week.